Hey guys, this is my leak. This is the My Taught You podcast. And a little bit ago, I wrote about the silent treatment on my Instagram and on my Twitter. And today we're going to talk with my good therapist friend, Jor-El Caraballo, a Southern bred, New York City made mental health professional who brings an affordable and comfortable approach to his work with clients. He's the co-creator of Viva Wellness, and he believes that true wellness is about taking care of the person as a whole. Viva Wellness provides mental health counseling, therapy, coaching, and holistic health services to help you meet your goals and become the idealized version of yourself. After reading a ton of comments on my Instagram regarding the silent treatment, I decided to give Jor-El a call to discuss the silent treatment because I realized in my very vague post, based on what I'm currently experiencing from a family member, that I too have deployed the silent treatment as a way to protect myself during my pregnancy. Once I realized that, my post felt a little irresponsible. So I decided to do this podcast to talk about the complexities of the silent treatment with a professional. My post is still up because I feel how I feel, but this was such an interesting topic, and I wanted to discuss it. Today, we're going to talk about what the silent treatment is, how it's harmful, what to do if you're on the side of giving the silent treatment, how to handle being given the silent treatment. We have a few listener questions, and then there's a special treat from Jor-El for my listeners that we'll tell you about at the end of this podcast. So, Jor-El, welcome back again. Thank
Hello, thank
you.
you.
Yes. Thank you for coming back. So I called Jor-El like, okay, you have to help me with this. And I feel like we've talked about this in the past about like
Mm,
relationships and ghosting, right? Because that
yes,
that is also a form of it. But
yeah,
if you, we're just gonna go, I think, like very elementary at first.
sure.
What is the silent treatment? If you can even like sum it up.
Yeah, I guess I think of it as, a intentional withholding of communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
And typically it happens after there's been some sort of, what I would say is like an emotional injury or a rupture, right? Someone's done something that you don't feel so happy about, or, we don't feel so happy about. And so
Mm-hmm.
then we sort of cut off all contact. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and I think that that's an important part of it is like, I only see it as, and we'll get into more of this later with like, boundaries and stuff. I only see it as silent treatment when you're really just like cutting off all contact.
Okay.
Um, and I think that that is one way in which people sort of deal with difficult situations.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So why do people use it? And so what was interesting, my cousin wrote me and we were just kind of talking about it from just like a family standpoint. And
Hmm.
he had a really good question about sort of like we're going to talk about why people use it, but he wondered if you know like is if you know about any sort of like historical, like where did this come from, is there any cultural, like I feel like a lot culturally, I mean, I'm sure everybody uses it, but it seemed to like really hit home in our community. So do you
Yeah.
know about anything like that? If not, we can just say why
Yeah.
people use it.
No, I don't, but I
Hmm.
do think you bring up I don't know about the historical context of it, but
Right,
do think
right.
you bring up a good point in that you, at least in my experiences so far, it's like there are different ways in which sort of different cultures or communities communicate.
Yes.
And we've, I think, even just talking about like mental health stigma, right? We talk
Hmm.
about like communities of color, Black communities, like there's this, air of silence
Hmm.
about that. And so I think that this is one of the ways that, culturally and historically, that Black folks have learned to cope in general, right? If
Okay.
you, right, even if you just think about it, obviously I'm
Hmm.
not an expert on history, but even if you just think about it from an American slavery perspective, right?
Okay.
Your every being, every part of your existence was controlled, even your language, right?
Mm.
So then thinking about like if you have a problem with something, you didn't dare share that out loud, especially within earshot of people who were in positions of power, because then that could lead to violence, that could lead to death, that could lead to all sorts of kind of abuse, right? And so I think that there's something to be said for the idea of this might be this historically kind of ingrained, um, I guess, what's the word? Historically ingrained behavior that has been
Okay.
adaptive for us
Hmm.
in some
Sure.
ways. I don't know.
Right. I guess, and then maybe the other side of it is like sometimes when we feel like we have no control over anything,
Hmm.
this is the one thing that we can
Yeah,
control, right? Like I
absolutely.
can control the fact that I'm not speaking to you. So, um, why do people use the silent treatment?
That's a good question. I think I think there are a lot of different reasons. I think the most
Right.
common one, or the
Okay.
most common few that I sort of come across, is that one, it is a punitive action. So it's meant
Right.
to punish the other person who you know wants your attention, right? They've
Right.
they've done something that you're not happy about, and you say like, "Nope, we are done," and you walk
Hmm.
away.
Right.
Um, so I think that's one of the most popular reasons. I think, and they're not mutually exclusive. So I also want to say that I think another reason is that people can feel overwhelmed in a moment with emotion,
Yes.
right? And so you're so angry, you're so hurt, you're so whatever the feeling is, that you just say like, okay, I just need to shut this down. Otherwise, it's going to be really,
Yeah.
really bad. Hmm.
Yeah. And that's yeah, I'm not more of like a I think pre-therapy,
Hmm.
I was on the punitive side of it because I simply was just repeating what I knew, right?
Yeah.
It's like I had experienced that, I knew how it made me feel, and I
Yeah.
wanted to make other people feel that way.
Sure.
And then after I kind of have been through therapy and I learned to use my words, I don't do that anymore, or I
Hmm.
thought I didn't, right?
Hmm.
And then when you and I started talking, or even just when people started to write me and say, well, I've used the silent treatment. And then I'm like, well, maybe that's not the silent treatment. Maybe that's
Hmm.
just something else. That's boundaries.
Hmm.
And then, I have been in situations where I have been so upset. I have been so hurt. But, the crazy thing is, Jarrell, even in that pain and in that hurt, I could not articulate what exactly
Yeah.
was wrong with me, right? Like
Yeah.
it was so crazy. Just during my pregnancy, I don't know. I think the pregnancy sort of like brought some things to the surface that I didn't realize were down so low. I thought, oh, I've been
Mm.
in therapy, I'm doing fine. And then all of a sudden I got pregnant. And the further along I went, I thought about becoming a parent. And then it just kind
Hmm.
of like it really sort of like messed me up in terms of like how I felt about maybe my own parents. And then it
Yeah.
just was like I got mad, but I couldn't figure out exactly what the hell I was mad about. But I was mad.
Yeah.
And I definitely did employ the silent treatment for, a lot of my pregnancy because I really wanted to create a space of like peace and calm.
Yeah.
And I knew that I knew that not having the words um would cause an argument and just more drama
Yeah.
that I just didn't want to experience in my pregnancy
Right.
because I'm like, I can't really tell you exactly why, which then, when you feel like when you can't when some people are professional fighters and arguers, you're
Yeah.
like I'm not even I can't touch
Right.
this,
Right.
until I have the words. And so that was that thing of like I did feel overwhelmed with emotion. And I think some people may um and and I feel for people who can never find the words.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's like a delay on
Yeah.
words, but I feel like some people they just can't find the words. And so that made me sad and that made me want to talk to you for those people who have essentially just been shut down.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, let me also say this. I've definitely employed the silent treatment in various periods throughout my life, sometimes on a
Mhm.
small scale, sometimes on a bigger scale. Like, we've
Yes.
all been there. So I don't come to this conversation saying like, oh, like, no one should ever do this. And like, shame on
Right.
you. I'm not saying that. It's a part of our experience as people. And,
Mhm.
there have been times where I was so upset that I thought if any word leaked out of my mouth, I would just be prompted to set someone on fire. And so I'm like, okay, I need to not do this. I need to take a little bit of time. I need to get myself
Right.
together and then potentially come back.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and I think that I, I don't know. I think it's there are people who don't feel like they have the words,
Mhm.
and I think in those instances, what that it's not a character flaw, it's not a fault. I think
Okay.
I do think that that is a really good opportunity to say, like, all right, I don't have the skills to navigate conflict, and
Mm.
I need someone to help me,
Yes.
like, have the skills to navigate conflict, to communicate, and be able to, like, de-intensify whatever the emotion is enough so that I can speak my truth, because that's really important. And
Yeah.
so when I think about the people, and I've worked with people who've been in that position where they say, like, I just don't know what to say. And
Mhm.
sometimes we start from a really foundational level about, like, identifying the feelings, and then trying
Yeah.
to model the actual words or phrases that, like, could be helpful in that situation.
Yeah, yeah. And what's so crazy is that if I think from like a time setup of like my sort of just not speaking, I don't even think it's the silent treatment. It's just like
Mm,
it's been 8 months and I just figured out what it was. And it was more of a thing of like, it wasn't like speaking in the relationship is not that it's not a priority, but it's just
yeah,
like, you know what? It was just on the back burner. Like I have
yeah.
other things going on. I need to take care of myself
Hmm.
to have a child. I need to take care of my child. And then maybe I can deal with trying to figure out, why this is a thing. But something, you sent me over some notes and topics, and you said that sometimes people, I want to talk about the people who use it from a punitive perspective,
Hmm.
and you were saying that they may be immature and can't handle the rejection or emotional injury they think you caused them.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that a little bit? Because I feel like that is more of what people have been experiencing,
Hmm.
is that, not really realizing, that the person that's employing this just is lacks maturity and can't handle rejection.
Yeah. I think, I say that because I think there is some I, in the moment when emotional sort of like pain occurs from you believe someone else caused that, right? They did something to you. Um, that sort of stance of employing the silent treatment um, is is really an underdeveloped emotional response. Again, you don't have the skills to say, like, you hurt me, you need to stop, or like, it's not okay what you did. And so sometimes, instead of saying those things, because this person lacks the skill or the awareness even internally of their emotional response, then it comes out in this passive aggressive way of, like, I'm not going to talk to you, and, like, I'm just not going to answer your calls, I'm going to run away, I'm going to escape,
Right.
and then, like, you're going to have to deal with that, because that's going to hurt you,
Mhm.
and, like, that's what you deserve right now. And so it's a
Right.
way. So I think it's immature, and I guess, like, and not in the, like, colloquial way we use it, but in the emotional way, to say, like,
Mhm.
you hurt me, so I'm now going to hurt you. Like, that's revenge. That's not
Right.
justice. And so, if you
Mhm.
really want justice, then it's about trying to restore, come back from the pain, and have someone make amends for that, and then fix that problem. But you can't do that if you're giving someone the silent treatment, as a way to punish them.
Right. And so I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
getting all over the place because every time you say something, I
sure.
get a thought. And I feel like sometimes there are some of us in our lives who there's a certain maybe family member that we are that it's
Hmm.
constantly going back and forth and back and forth. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Yes.
you do this. I mean, I've done the silent treatment, like, I mean, or I've had it be deployed on me.
Hmm.
And then I'm the kind of person, so this is my personality, and I've been in therapy for a long time, but there are some parts
Hmm.
of me that God is still working on me.
I hear
And
you.
and my attitude, Jarrell, is like this. Because I've experienced it for so long, as a young kid growing up, or as much as you can
Hmm.
handle, when somebody does it to me, even if it's like for a day or
Hmm.
two or like a week, I will I will top your ass.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
I will top you. It's like
Yeah.
if you're trying to play this game, and I got so mad. It's like it's like, okay, I call you, you don't answer the phone. I text you, you don't respond. So it's like, okay, now our pattern is now thrown
Mm-hmm.
off. So I'm picking up that something's wrong, but I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what is wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
So I call you, you don't pick up. I call you, you don't pick up. So a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, and now I've exhausted everything.
Yeah.
Now when you try me back,
Mm-hmm.
though, like, it's
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
It's like I get so mad at people who use that tactic that
Yeah.
then I just 1, 5, 10 up it. And
Right.
so it's like I don't even know how to stop doing that, because I really want to show that person, oh, you think you can hurt me?
Yeah.
Watch me extend this indefinitely.
Right. Right. Like you don't
You
know
know?
what fight you signed up for.
Yeah,
Let's go.
exactly.
Right. Because I got strength, I got like
Yes.
stamina, I got endurance, so
Yes.
you better be
And see,
ready. Yeah.
and that's how I feel, and I know I shouldn't feel this way, but I promise you, I do feel like I have endurance. I
Yeah.
nobody can do this better than me, and
Right.
I shouldn't even be proud of that, but I can do it,
Right.
you know?
That's real. That's real. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know, and I guess we can maybe talk about that later, but I guess I want to talk about how this can be harmful. How
Yeah.
is the silent treatment harmful? We know it hurts.
Yeah.
Sometimes we know it hurts when we're on the receiving end, and sometimes we know we're hurting the person,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So, how is this harmful to us? Because I've read all of these different articles
Yeah.
about, like, this is abusive.
Yeah. Well, and I think as a jumping off point, we've talked
Mhm.
about, especially socially now, like ghosting, right? So if you just
Yes.
think about that in this specific context of dating, like if
Okay.
you are, if you're talking with someone and then they ghost you, like how bad that feels, right?
Mhm.
Um, and or a lot of people know how that feels, and so if you think about that, just that sort of, I guess, relatively small experience, we'll say. And then you think about it in the context of a different relationship, one that's been more established, one that has a lot more history, that has a lot of other stuff attached to it.
Mhm.
Then, especially if this is a pattern that, like, let's say I'm the one who's employing the silent treatment, right? Then if this is a pattern of mine, for whatever reason, um, then the negative effects of that are profound, right? Because then you're disrupting the relationship, right? So
Mhm.
then you're
Right.
just practically not investing in the same amount because there's no contact. So which can then build resentment between people. um, I think there's even some research that says it decreases self-esteem in the person who's on the receiving end. So they
Mhm.
start to feel worthless, like they're
Yep.
insignificant,
Yep.
which is kind of the goal, right? If
That's
you're right.
exactly. Yeah,
So it's like you're
yeah.
meeting the goal, but it's like
Yeah.
bad. Yeah.
I know. I have this awful saying that I'm like, and this is just because of I know my experience. It's like I will ignore you to the point of you questioning your own existence.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And that's
Yes.
so that's what it does. So it does make people feel that way.
Yes.
And what I found really interesting is that I was reading about this a few days ago. There's even some research that it can cause physical pain
Yes.
in the person's on the receiving end,
Mhm.
right? So you think about, like, when you're talking about something that's really emotionally trying for you, um, sometimes I see when I'm talking with clients, like they might, you kind of intuitively like hug yourself or you put your hand on your stomach or something. It's
Mhm.
probably because you feel a pain there. And so I don't think people realize that you know, uh, you can be causing emotional pain, right? You can be building resentment, but you also may be helping foster this like pain response in this other person. And I think there was something I also read that was like, it causes autoimmune issues. So
Mm.
particularly, and I think this is probably, and I'm sort of reaching here, but probably more um, relevant to like long-standing patterns of,
Mhm.
the silent treatment and abuse, that it would affect these sort of things. But I think
Yep.
even on a situational basis, it's like you're actively causing pain. to someone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so again, it leaves the initiator without effective problem solving or conflict resolution skills. Thus, I
Yep.
feel like it continues. I feel like if there's
Yes.
somebody you're constantly doing this around and around and around and around, and in some instances, it just ends relationships altogether. Which, as you were talking about ghosting, I feel like
Hmm.
some of my experience with talking to my listeners with ghosting is that the person who did the ghosting doesn't tell them why they're not speaking to them anymore, and a
Yeah.
lot of what they do is they leave that person questioning themselves.
Yeah.
What did I say something when we went to the mall that day? When the
Hmm.
truth is, a lot of times these guys, and this is just me being real, they ghosted you because they're married.
Hmm.
They ghosted you because they lie. They don't really have jobs, and they come into your lives. But these are just these psycho narcissists. They
Hmm.
come into your lives and they get you all. I don't know, there are a group of these guys that wanna get you all, like, riled up and excited about
Yeah.
them and then dip
Yeah.
because they know that they can't be the guy that they sold you
Right.
on.
But they want to get the things that they want to get and then leave. So they get your
Yes.
emotional labor, your support, your interest. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. And so, I because I know I really wanna I feel like we could talk about this all day, but I really wanna get to the
Yeah.
questions. What can you do if you employ the silent treatment?
So I think it's, if someone's listening, if you're listening now and you recognize like, oh, I think this is something that I'm doing, um, I think the best thing that you can do for yourself is use this as an opportunity to investigate,
Mhm.
like what you gain from behaving in this way. And people see
Mm.
this in like whenever I say this to clients I'm working with, I'm like, well, so what did you gain? People are like, well, I didn't gain anything. It was terrible. I'm like, no, 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 no. You always
Mhm.
gain something. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to seem rational or like realistic or practical, but you always gain something. Otherwise, the behavior would stop. So,
Mm.
for a lot of people who are employing the silent treatment, it might be about gaining a sense of control, a sense of powerfulness. It might
Okay.
be, it might just be about regulating emotion in that moment. So I think
Okay.
investigating, what you're gaining and starting that process, I think is really important. And then exploring, if how it might be hurting others or what the impact might be on your relationship. So just I don't know, taking stock of like the dating relationships, family relationships, friend relationships, and say like, what happened with this person like that I'm not talking to anymore? Or, what was that part of me doing the silent treatment? How did it impact them? What was the falling out like? Or was there a falling out? And just like looking at all of that, trying to do that without judgment, just to sort of like you're gathering information. So I'm not saying that you need to shame yourself or you need to look at yourself and say, like, oh my God, I never should have done that. Or, I think it's more effective to say, all right, I need to gather all this data and let me look at it. Let me make sense of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And how do you handle it if you're on the receiving end of the silent treatment?
And that's the tough part because I think sometimes what can happen is um, someone else's, non-adaptive way of coping with the situation, like and they use the silent treatment, could also trigger you,
Mhm.
and then you want to be very like reactive. And so I think the first thing is just to stay calm.
Okay.
Um, so try not to. I always say respond, don't react.
Mm.
So like giving yourself space to say like, all right, I know I'm feeling this way about it. Like this was messed up what this person is doing, but I'm not going to fly off the handle because that's not going to serve this. Like that won't problem solve this situation.
Right.
And so then just, thinking about establishing boundaries, communicate. And I think this is a big one because a lot of times people who are using the silent treatment are hurt,
Mhm.
and so I think in the moment, if you're on the receiving end of that, communicate your desire to solve the problem.
Mhm.
Say, like, I understand you're upset. Like, I don't appreciate what you're doing right now. I want to solve this problem.
Okay.
And can we talk about this tomorrow?
Right.
Um, and then just making a plan to follow up and
Okay.
and then actually following up, saying, circling back the next day saying, listen, like, what can we do to resolve this? If the person is still sort of saying like, no, I'm not talking to you, and this is an extended thing that's happening, um, then you have to be very you just have to be strong in supporting yourself and say like, okay, I need to now take space for myself, because this is no longer this momentary lapse. This is a bigger issue that needs to be addressed with this person on their own.
Right. And is it at what point, because I feel like
Yeah.
before we get into the questions, is there ever a time for you to just say, you know what, I'm done. Like I've circled
Yeah.
back. I've tried this person, and I feel like the minute that you do that, then the person's like, okay, I'm ready to talk now, and you're just
Yeah.
like, actually, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there ever like a time where you're just like, it's okay to walk
For
away?
sure. And I
Okay.
think I don't think that there's any sort of concrete time frame. I think that differs from
Yep.
person to person, and I think it also depends on the relationship, right? It depends on the
Right.
context of
Right.
the relationship, and so I think, if this is an ongoing pattern, if it's something that if you've been on the receiving end, you've tried to address responsibly and say like you've held your tongue, you've
Mhm.
managed yourself, and say like, listen, I want to work through this, and this person is just not being responsive, and that's happening repeatedly. I think that that's a good time to say like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want this for my life, so I need to move on.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to get into some listener questions. We have three.
Yeah.
First one says, I've given the silent treatment pretty much my whole life. It was easier than expressing my emotions. I don't argue, I leave. A few years ago, my ex checked me. During a disagreement, I ran through a list of his flaws and thought I had the best of him. Welp, he politely and unexpectedly read a few of mine back to me, and it didn't feel good. He prided
Mm.
himself on having enough courage to work things out with the people he loves, unlike me, who leaves anytime someone doesn't meet my expectations. Needless to say, I've been working on myself ever since. My question for you is, how do you find the courage to speak up about your emotions? Sometimes I'm counting to three. Other days I'm writing notes in my phone to rehearse. And there are times I convince myself it's not worth talking about so I can avoid the conversation. I'm really working on my heart, but it ain't easy. Thank you for the episode. So,
Mm.
Jarrell, I thought about this. And so I will
Yeah.
answer, tell you what I do, and then you and
Yeah.
I can maybe talk about this.
Sure.
But um, I will tell you that it is difficult, finding the courage to speak up about how you feel, especially
Hmm.
in situations where um, you just never have been able to, like, relationships with your parents. It may be
Hmm.
easier to speak up to. It may be easier to speak up to like internet strangers,
Right.
and than it is maybe like coworkers or then relationships, romantic relationships,
Hmm.
then family relationships. Like
Yeah.
all of those different relationships have varying degrees of like courage. But I think in the ones where it's really difficult, we're afraid to speak up because we are attached to the response or reaction, right?
Hmm.
Like it was so difficult and it took me so much courage that if I tell you how I feel, like you better receive it in the most like
Right.
loving, and I think that for me, that was the first part of understanding that just because I got up my gusto to say how I feel doesn't mean that I'm going to get the desired reaction or response
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
any at that point. So kind of putting myself in a space of I got to do this for me, right?
Yeah.
I got to get this off my chest and I've got to practice using my words. So this is less
Yeah.
about them and this is more about me figuring this out. And I also think that it's just like anything, it's like a muscle. The more
Hmm.
you use it and do it, the better you get at it, And
Hmm.
so um I do think it's a good idea to write notes in the phone. I've got notes in my phone right now. I'm telling you that, like, I was laying in bed and it was like, I'm struggling with the fact that, I've been in this in this holding pattern with the silent treatment with a family member for almost a year.
Hmm.
And I have not been able to articulate why I'm mad. And I know that every time I say something, like I try to, talk to people about it, like, I'm mad about this and this. And it's like, that's not really it.
Hmm.
And it finally hit me this is why, and
Mm-hmm.
my notes, the notes that I wrote in my phone is like 2 a.m. And the note that I have is that your behavior is a source of trauma for me, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
couldn't really articulate that. It's like, that's it.
Yeah.
Over the years, this has caused trauma, and this pain point has made it difficult for me to enter relationships with
Mm-hmm.
XYZ sort, like
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm like, okay, I'm starting to put it together. And so it's okay if you write the notes. It's okay if you rehearse.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think it's okay if you don't feel like you can say it, because I've had these moments too. Okay, I've had moments where I could not physically break up with somebody. I knew I
Mm-hmm.
needed to break up, but I could not get it out of my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you know what? I got to go resort to the next best
Mm-hmm.
thing, which I think some people think is wrong, but I got a text
Mm-hmm.
message, right? I've got to just text, email, say it. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes emailing is a little, it's hard to, if you it's hard to determine tone in
Yeah.
email, but I also think that sometimes email kind of gives you some time to
Yes.
respond, give you
Yeah.
some time to think about things, and kind of keeps the dialogue from catching fire too soon.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that, like, you don't always have to um, I mean, I think there are some ways that you can do it, but you don't always have to, like, call the person or meet the person and have like your notes. I think
Yeah.
start where you are with what you have and kind of build from there. But what do you
Yeah.
think? How do people find the courage to speak up about their emotions?
I mean, I think you said like a lot of great things just in your response.
Mhm.
And I agree with, most, if not all of what you said. I think ideally you would be able to get to a point where you can say to someone who means something to you, you could in face to face communicate that.
Mhm.
I will always think that's better. Right.
Okay.
Right. Like
Yep.
that's a me thing. And I think that it's always because I also think it does speak to developing courage. Like if
Okay.
you're able to, not saying the other person is a monster, but if you're able to face that fear and that monster in the face, then that's
Mhm.
when like you've arrived, right? That's
Okay.
when you know that
Fair
there's no
enough. I
turning back.
believe.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
So I'll always sort of like want to help people move towards that. Um,
That. Yep.
but I think your point about like doing also like starting where you are is A1. Like I think that's perfect because, if that means you're writing notes or you have to send a text because you can't do it in person yet, that's okay. Like
Okay.
keep do what works for you. Send an email, and I think the thing that's so important about that kind of communication is, as you said, it gives a little bit more space, which sometimes can
Mhm.
be really helpful with the emotional volatility of something, right? You can
Right.
scale
Right.
back, you can wait to respond, that person can wait to respond, they can think about their words more intentionally as opposed to just like spewing out whatever is their first reaction, right? So
Mhm. Mhm.
you can respond as opposed to just react. Um,
Right.
so I think that that's good. I also recommend, in terms of developing the courage, like one, this
Okay.
sounds silly out of context, but it actually really
Okay.
does help. Is that
Okay.
I tell people all the time that it is about practice, and so you can even practice it outside of the context that you're asking about. So if
Okay.
you're not an assertive person or you don't feel the courage or the confidence to do that in that situation, then think about really smaller situations that you can sort of challenge yourself to be honest. So something
Mm.
as simple as like someone, you're with a friend and they say like, "Oh, I'd like to go here for dinner." Right? And
Mhm.
let's say whether you really care about where you go to dinner or not, sometimes it might be
Mhm.
helpful to say like, actually, I don't really want to go there. Let's go somewhere else.
Mm.
Because what you're
Okay.
doing in that moment is you're holding space for your anxiety, waiting for their reaction, right? And so you're
Mm.
practicing sitting with that feeling,
Right.
and so the more that you practice sitting with that feeling, then it's going to prepare you to have more courage and say, like, okay, well, these 9 times I did this similar sort of thing, it turned out okay. I was okay at the end. So maybe this 10th time that's a bit more challenging. It's, with a family member, I have to say, you hurt me. then I feel like I have some history of being successful with this.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. But I could, because I like when you
Yeah.
said, practice like sitting with that emotion of like,
Yeah.
okay, what are they going to say? How are they going to
Yep.
respond?
Yeah.
And so I think I do. I mean, obviously you've got the tips and tricks. But I do realize that it is difficult. It is really
Yeah.
hard a lot of times to say how you feel.
Yeah.
I As you were talking, I was thinking about something else that I have started to do and I've done over the years that really works is trying to catch it in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because a lot of times we'll do and say something and we know like maybe a couple minutes after we said it, like that was too far. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like you took it too far, or that wasn't true,
Yeah.
or you realized that you were acting from a hurt
Yeah.
space that really didn't even have anything to do with that
Yeah.
person. And I feel like the best thing that you can do in that moment is just to say that, apologize, even if the person's mad, you at least have gotten that out. And it's
Yeah.
like, you know what? This wasn't even about you.
Right.
You know, I'm simply reacting from a hurt space. Because, I'm so used to people letting me down, or,
Yeah.
because the last several people that I dated did this,
Mm-hmm.
I'm now assuming that you're going to do that, and that's not fair to you.
Yeah.
And I would like to apologize. And it's that will disarm somebody in a second. Like,
Yeah.
what?
Right.
It's like, but if you realize it, just grow up and say it,
Yeah.
and that is even, um I feel like that helps that helps to catch it before now it's been 1 week and y'all haven't spoken. Everybody's checking their
Yep.
phones to see who's going to speak first. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, just say that. And then that way, if that person does put some distance and they're not speaking to you, you feel like you at least you said something. You
Yeah.
said your piece. You're not, like, oh man, I didn't even get a chance to say something.
Yeah. I think that's a great
So,
point.
okay. Thank you. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to keep going.
Okay.
So next question was, hi, my leak. She said, thank you for all you do for us. You're so welcome. I can go on and on about how you've impacted my life. I appreciate that. Now, the silent treatment. For so long, I would use it as a punishment tool, but lately I've been using it to distance myself from people I no longer care to interact with because communicating with them isn't healthy. My question is, when is the silent treatment okay, if ever?
Hmm.
I'm going to ask you. We kind of talked about it,
Yeah.
but I'm going to let you kind of to package this for us.
Yeah. So I generally say that the silent treatment is not a good way to handle conflict. Um,
Okay.
so I wouldn't advise anyone to employ it. Obviously, you heard I've employed it before. There are
Mhm.
times, even now that I know better, that I don't do better. Um, right?
Same.
So, like, that's just part of our experience. I don't think that that should be the goal, though. I think that the difference between the silent treatment and setting boundaries is kind of, I don't know, curvy,
Okay.
um, and dotted. And so I think I say this, like, if you are sure that you are ending a relationship
Okay.
and that's no longer something that you want to invest in, sometimes I think it's okay to give, and I think it's preferable to give someone a heads up so you're not the one ghosting. And this is why I think silent treatment is different from boundaries, right? Because you're intentionally setting a boundary by saying, like, listen, like, things between us haven't been good for a while. Like, every time I talk to you, I end up feeling a certain way. And I don't think that's healthy. So I think it's best we don't talk anymore.
Okay.
Like, once you're doing that, you're not employing the silent treatment because you're
Okay.
setting a boundary and you're asking this person to hold to that boundary. The silent treatment is just ghosting. It's like, I'm going away. I'm not saying anything about that. I'm not setting a boundary, because what that then does, it's actually, obviously, we talked about how it's harmful to the person on the receiving end, but it's also harmful to you, because
Right.
then you're holding on to this stuff that you haven't addressed and you haven't problem solved around.
Okay.
And so then you're carrying that, like, oh, like, man, I really wish I would have said, this, or I wish I would have been able to tell this person that this is how I felt. like you will carry that with you, and it's unnecessary to carry that. Um,
Mhm.
and so I think that that's one way it can hurt you, and the other way that it can hurt you by not expressing your boundaries is, so this person or persons that you are deciding to not be connected to anymore can always come back.
Right.
They can come back and be like, "Hey, what's up?" And then you're like, "Are you kidding? Like,
Right.
why are you talking to me?" And they're like, "What do
Right.
you mean?"
Mhm.
Right. And so then you're just like, then you scratched the wound, you opened up the scab again, and then you have to deal with it all over again.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, I appreciate you. That's a good that is all good, and just saying, like, it is best to kinda, like, say that I'm employing some boundaries and this just doesn't work for me anymore.
Yeah.
The end.
Yeah.
Okay, and then our final question. She is saying, she says she wants to say that she appreciates everything I do for women in the Black community. You're really helping us get a leg up in multiple playing fields. I
Hmm.
really appreciate that. Those
Hmm.
compliments, they always make me feel warm and fuzzy
Yeah.
when I'm, like racing to record some of these
Hmm.
things. Like I really wanted to get this done.
Hmm.
So she says she's going to try to make it brief, but I have a long history with this man, so I want to convey the emotions, but also not be biased. I am 28 years old and dated this guy officially from the ages of 21 to 23. We ultimately broke up because we were trying to play house at a young age, coupled with some gaslighting from him. And Jarrell, can you define gaslighting for us before I continue?
Yeah. So gaslighting is basically what happens when someone sort of like causes you pain and then tells you that they didn't
Mm,
do that, or that you're not in pain.
mm. Oh
In
yeah,
a
I know
nutshell,
that.
right?
Okay. Right. We know that
Yes.
person. We know,
Yes.
right. And adding in some, so she says, coupled with some gaslighting from him and some temper issues from me. Well, at least once a year, we come back into each other's lives. For him, it is usually after a breakup, I assume, because he has dated multiple women since me publicly, and I have privately only dated one or two. This is because I was heartbroken after our breakup and have been very open about my desire to work things out and get back together. When we do start talking again and being quote unquote friends, I end up going too fast emotions wise and scaring him off. This leads to the silent treatment from him, which leads me to having an emotional outburst because I hate being ignored. He would always tell me that I am just too much to handle, and then I just fall back because this is my second biggest emotional trigger, second to being ignored. Fast forward to this year, I am in a much better place. I have done a lot of self healing through reading, writing, my girlfriend's meditation, mindfulness, you, and ultimately just finding myself, loving myself, and being more secure. He, of course, enters back into my life after a breakup, apologizing for how he treated me, which is a first. Our last falling out was very messy, and I really told him about some of his less than admirable qualities. So slowly but surely we become friends and fall back into our old habits, but this time it's different. We're both making an effort, and I attribute a lot of it to the work I've done with myself over the year and kind of assume that he has grown too. After a few visits from each of us and a couple of dates, I ask where this is going so I can know the next move I should make in my life. I know I shouldn't base the moves I make off a man. He's like, girl, yes, you know this. You
Right.
know what I'm going to say. But I got some more to say. I was like, I picked this letter because I'm like, I need Jarrell to help
Yeah.
bring me back. Because I'm like, girl, have I really been here for you? Um, and so, however, I've learned to be very transparent in hopes for honesty and transparency and a transparent response in return. I basically tell him I don't want to date anyone else if we have a future. He clams up. I tell him it's cool, but uncomfortable convos need to be had. I let him off the hook and tell him to think about it and get back to me. He doesn't get back to me on it. After the visit, we continue to be on good terms and talk about other things, but he is going on about our convos like he isn't going to bring it up to me or give me an answer. It's been 2 weeks. Eventually, I can't take the waiting any longer, and I just tell him not to worry about it. I'm not worried about being in a
Hmm.
relationship, but you are. He doesn't respond. A week later, he hits me with small talk. I hate being ignored, so I don't ignore other people. So I respond being short. And I want to
Hmm.
talk about that too, about like just because
Yeah.
that sentence, I'm
Okay.
going to just highlight this so I can circle back to that because that's not, you know, And this goes on until I'm not really mad anymore. And once again, desiring to further our relationship. We keep things on a friendship level until flirting starts back up. I send him the love language quiz because I've always talked about it with him and I wanted him to take it. He doesn't respond. A week later, he texts me with small talk again. I'm extra short and make an effort to stop texting him before he stops texting me so I'm not in a vulnerable position again. I
Mm-hmm.
know so many people who deal with this, and I have too, which is why I'm continuing. Between these times of being ignored and the silent treatment, I
Yeah.
go through great emotional turmoil. This includes overthinking, crying, stressing, anxious thoughts, and insecurities. I always mourn the loss of the relationship and overcome because, like I said, I'm in a different mental space and I don't want to invest or put energy into something that is not matching mine. But I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to have to keep healing myself after each silent treatment and then put myself in a position for it to happen again because I know that if I bring this issue up to him, he may clam up if we are face to face or ignore me as if it's through text. Ultimately, I would like yours and the therapist's opinion of this situation. Why does he choose to ignore instead of just being upfront and honest about his feelings? I've told him multiple times that I'd rather my feelings be hurt than be waiting and confused. Is he doing this because I'm letting him? Does he really know how it feels? We have history. I really do love him, but I love me more. I really just need some expert advice on how to move forward and or how to handle being the recipient of the silent treatment. Um, okay, I'm gonna let you.
Mm-hmm.
This is like, okay, I will
Yeah.
say I'm 39 years old now, but
Mm-hmm.
this is definitely a 25, 26, 27,
Mm-hmm.
28-year-old my leak letter.
Yeah.
Um, there are people there are people that I went years doing this kind of stuff with,
Yeah.
you know? And even when you said you sent the love language quiz, I was like, girl, you are so my league. Like, you are so my league circa
Right.
20,
I
circa
love it.
2000, circa 2004. Like, okay, let me do this,
Yeah.
like maybe we're not speaking the same love language,
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, now that I am a bit more mature and I have experience and I've had therapy, it's like he is telling you loud and
Yeah.
clear where he
Yeah.
stands. I always say, um, not not the silent treatment is a form of communication.
Yes.
Not communicating is a form of
Yes.
communication. And he knows how he is not unable to
Right.
speak because he knows how to get what he wants when he wants
Right.
it. But then I hate when women say that I scared him off. It's like, what?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, this is
Yeah.
we're
Yep.
you're grown up, and if you asking some simple questions scare him off, let him stay scared and be
Yes.
gone.
Yeah.
Please, I don't think it's unreasonable to say to someone that you've been knowing for years. Okay,
Right.
this is not somebody that you just met on Tinder 2 weeks ago. This is
Right.
somebody that you've been going in circles for years, to say, okay, we've been doing this for nearly a decade.
Yeah.
What's up?
Right.
And if that scares them, then you're not too much. I hate when people
Mm-hmm.
do that. They
Yeah.
allow these guys to make them feel like asking a basic question makes you too much.
Yeah.
You're not too much, or purposely doing this to you so that you are questioning yourself.
Yeah.
And it's like, why is he doing this? It's like, because he's immature,
Yeah.
because he's not ready to settle down,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know, like sometimes me and my girlfriends in my youth, we used to come up with this thing where we would be like, maybe because, I got my ish together, girl, he's just not ready, and a
Mm-hmm.
guy, when he doesn't, if he doesn't have his job right and he's not where he needs to be, or I'm too intimidating. And I don't even care about any of that anymore.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, um, I am going to release the situation so I can go. There is somebody out there that you don't have to go through this with. There is somebody out there who wants you so bad that they would never, ever put you in a position to have you writing me and talking to me
Mm-hmm.
about this.
Mm-hmm.
That's how much they love and care about you. And that's the person that you need to find.
Yeah.
Okay, but this
Yeah.
is just me. This is me. This is not non-professional. This is just my leak,
You went
your
in.
girlfriend, over a glass of wine, and I'm like, "Girl, we can." This is now. I'm ready to order a second glass because now I,
Right.
I got more to
Now
say.
you're stressed and you need to like calm back down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now I'm fired up, but I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna let you tackle this a little bit, Drell.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of what you said is true, right?
Hmm,
This
hmm.
first, you're not friends. You never were friends. That's what I would
Mm,
say. And I
mm.
think I say that
Hello.
because it's really important for people to realize is that like sometimes you can be friends with an ex. This is not that
Hmm.
situation. A lot of
Okay.
times we want to convince ourselves that like, oh, we can be friends when we're not ready to be that. And we haven't moved on from this person occupying a certain space in our life. Right. And so this
Right.
person for your writer has, occupied a certain space and a role for a long time. And so, and that was never a friend. So I just want to put that out there
Right.
to say that like, this is important in terms of thinking about the boundaries of the situation. Right?
Right. And
Yeah.
see, here, this is me. I'm like, I'm all fired up, and you came through and were like, "He's not your friend." Let's start
Yeah.
there. You are not,
You're not friends.
friends.
No.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, you're not
I love
friends.
that.
And so there was, I think this is best summed up by uh, recently on, I think her Insta stories, Jada Pinkett Smith said,
Mhm.
you can love someone, but sometimes you need to love them from over there. And so,
Yep.
in thinking about this situation, I think, as you said, it's very clear that this guy is not ready. It doesn't matter what the reason is, he's not ready. And until
Mhm.
he does some
Right.
very serious internal work, he's not going to be ready. And that work cannot be done by anyone
Mm-mm.
else. And and so,
Right.
it's very clear that the negative impact of this back and forth is pretty strong. And like you deserve better than that.
You
Like
do.
we all deserve better than that.
Yes.
And so I think this is a good opportunity to say like these I need to put up boundaries for me because I'm submitting myself to something that's causing me pain. And so I thought that question of like, is he doing this because I let him? Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. He's
Yep.
doing it because he knows he can and he's getting a certain response. And so this could continue forever. If no
Right.
one changes, this can continue forever. And so
Right.
what I would encourage this person to think about is say like, all right, if this is something that's causing me pain, then I need to change something about this situation. I need to establish a boundary. I need
Mhm.
to actually grieve the end of this relationship and take care of myself as opposed to continuing to invest in someone who's not pouring into me.
Right. There it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's tough because I think a lot of people do find themselves in this kind of situation, like you
Yes.
said.
That's what I
It's really, really common.
it
Yeah.
is, and it's maybe, and it's not even just a, I know it's not necessarily an age thing, but like I brought up
Mm-hmm.
my age because I'm like I was in the when I was her age, I was doing this was me.
Yeah.
This was
Yeah.
me. And I probably would still be doing it had I not just gone to therapy because, you know, what kind of led me to therapy as it related to relationships. So I had my family stuff, and then I had this like I said to myself, how is it possible that just about everything I put my mind to, I accomplish, and
Mm-hmm.
not well, but very well. Like
Mm-hmm.
I exceed at everything I do. But when it comes to relationships, I'm her. This
Mm-hmm.
is how I'm sitting here. I'm like, well, maybe I need to send in the quiz. Maybe I need
Yeah.
to do this. I'm trying to overachieve. And it's like I know I'm a good person. I
Yep.
know I'm not. What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
And I kind of went to therapy almost in a what's wrong with me
Yeah.
space. And that's what really is the reason why I wanted to read this, is that like there's nothing wrong with
Right.
you, for starters. There's nothing wrong with you. And I feel like sometimes when relationships kind of go down like this, that's how you're left feeling.
Yeah.
And then you take that into the next thing and the next thing, and
Mm-hmm.
you feel like, oh my God, maybe I do need to go back to that thing because it's happening again and again and again, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe I need to go back to him because even in my new stuff, it's the same things happening.
Hmm.
But ding ding ding, what I realized was that my the relationship, that core relationship with the person that I kept going back to, was sort of like representative of the trauma that I had experienced as a child. And
Hmm.
so I was trying to change my past through this. And so the pattern really wasn't connected to this guy or this relationship. The pattern was connected to my past.
Yeah.
And once I kind of healed that part of my past, I started approaching relationships like this. Things sometimes just don't work out,
Yeah.
right? And something not working out, like this relationship with this guy is not working out, and it doesn't mean that either party is
Right.
bad. He's not a bad person, you're not a bad person.
Hmm.
It's just not working,
Yeah.
And so I'll never forget when I was like super young and in my party era.
Hmm.
I remember meeting this guy at this party and talking about the fact that I had just like broken up, and I just didn't think that I would ever like be able to be in a relationship again. Dramatic.
Hmm.
That's what I said. Your girl was
Yeah.
going there. And this guy said to me, and I never forgot it. He was like, "So let's just say you go into a shoe store and there's this pair of shoes that you just absolutely have to have." And I'm like, "Oh my God, I've been in that situation." And you ask
Hmm.
them for your size and they don't have it. Do
Hmm.
you stop wearing shoes? It's just like, so are
I
you
love
never gonna
that.
wear shoes again? Yeah. And he was just like, it's not your, they don't have your size. You move on.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, even though this relationship is like that bad pair of Balenciagas,
Hmm.
you have to move on and find something else. It's not working. It's not fair to you or your job
Hmm.
to spin your wheels like this
Yeah.
trying to figure this guy out. He is not worth your time.
Yeah.
He's not, and it's not your fault. And even though I don't care, even if you did some crappy stuff
Yeah.
in that relationship, said some inappropriate things,
Right.
it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
okay. Move on, move on. And so, I know that there are a lot of people who are feeling like this, and I know that it's easier said than
Sure.
done, because it can take years to kind of heal past this sort of thing. But I
Yeah.
just hope that you understand that there's nothing wrong with you. It's okay if you walk away. You don't have to feel bad for this
Yeah.
person. You don't Wanting to have a healthy, happy relationship doesn't make you too
Yep.
much.
100%.
Saying saying that to a guy, I would like to be married. I would like to be a mother. That's what those are goals in relationships. That doesn't make you
Right.
too much. I just hope that you know that. And
Yeah.
so we are approaching our hour. I am going to tell you, I'm going to let, Jarrell hook us up at the end, but special treat alert. Jor-El created a tips to breakthrough silent treatment guide that will be available to my listeners at the link vivawellnessblog.com/ my leak. And you guys spell my name Myleik. Don't misspell it. That's what it is. Um, that's going to be awesome for you. So if you enjoy this podcast and you kind of just need something to help you work through some things,
Yeah.
regardless of which side you're on, vivawellnessblog.com/ my leak. I want you to also check out Jor-El's new venture, Viva Wellness, at Viva Wellness NYC. And there are Viva Wellness NYC on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And then, Jor-El, do you have any closing words for us?
Yeah, I would just say, I think if you want to download that handout, I think it'd be really helpful. It has some questions to ask yourself if you are someone who uses the silent treatment to help you, identify this in yourself, figure out some new ways to work through it. If you are on the receiving end of the silent treatment, it covers some of what we talked about today in terms of like ways to handle the situation and to keep
Mhm.
moving forward. And so, I think it'd be a really helpful download. Happy to offer that to the listeners. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Awesome. I thank you so much for always taking my call, for making time to hop on the phone with me,
Sure.
with all my crazy requests. If you guys have any more questions, you can always contact me at mytaughtyou@gmail.com. Thank you for always listening. If you have any if you want to take this conversation further, tweet us. We are on
Yeah.
Twitter. You tweet me, I'll add Jarrell onto it. We can maybe talk about it over Twitter a
Yeah.
little bit, but tweet me at my leak. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. I'd love to hear about where you've stood on the issue. So hit me up on Instagram, hit me up on Twitter, or drop a line in my inbox. Thank you so much. You guys have a good one.